I heard that. Didn't you? That's right. That was the echoing call of the cuckoo clock calling us back to Kids Book Read Aloud, S.C. Crovo, Magic of Nicholas. I'm S.C. Crovo. I'm the author and writer of those magical families of Nicholas. Do you think he heard it too? Does he look a little bit familiar? White hair, red coat, sack on his back. He may look familiar, but he may not be who you think he is. Now, we're on chapter 4, Lost and Found, and as I said, you're going to meet somebody who may not be who you think he is. So let's get started. I just need Dolly here. Our Dolly is the keeper of the key. Thank you, Dolly. And I've got my key. Let me just slip it on so I feel just a little bit magical. Here's our book, Masters of Nicholas and Target Earth, and our special book cover. So let's get started on chapter 4, Lost and Found. The Nicholas had delivered his one gift and was a few days away from the Nicholas village. He was returning by foot rather than through a door. The final morning dawned, but as he mounted his horse, cloudiness blocked his once clear thoughts. Shaking his head, he gently squeezed the sides of his horse. The horse moved forward, but the Nicholas pulled the reins to stop it again. He looked straight ahead, then to his left, then to his right. Something was wrong, for he did not know which direction to take. Darkness fell and cold air set in around them. They stopped for the night in the center of a cluster of sturdy pines. Patting his arms for warmth, he longed for his thick, woolen Nicholas plaid clothing. His leather vest, long-sleeve shirt, leather pants, and leather boots were not suited to the temperature. He detached a sword from his side and placed it carefully by a circle of stones he had constructed. "I will be sorry to lose you, Guinevere." He knelt by the named sword and held the leather-strapped handle with affection. It was a gift, and he would be sorry to lose it once he transformed back into his original attire at the end of his journey. "It is time for a fire, Vina." He straightened and stretched his arms to the darkened sky. Brown curls peeked from beneath his single feathered hat as his warm brown eyes looked toward his horse. He wanted to make sure that she was settled for the night. The changed chestnut brown stallion whinnied and scraped at the ground. "I know." He walked quickly to his horse. "You miss the warmth of your yakut coat, but I'll soon have you warmed up." He lifted the flap on his side saddle, removed a handful of items that looked like pebbles, and returned to the circle of rocks. Leaning over the circle, he rubbed the pebbles in his hands together rapidly and dropped them onto the small, stacked pile of stones in the center. Instantly, a blue flame ignited. "This will keep us warm for the night." The Nicholas gazed into the flame, but then turned and walked back to his horse. He removed a handful of oats from a pouch and placed it on the ground in front of his horse. "Here is a nice snack for you, Vina. We should be able to find our way home soon, but for now, I'm afraid we're lost." He patted Vina once more and removed a rolled blanket strapped to his saddle. Returning to the fire, he unrolled the blanket and sat down. The night was quiet and the stars bright. He leaned back and let his head sink into the softness of the blanket. The stars twinkled above him, and he could imagine seeing the same stars in the sky over the Nicholas village. How he wished they were there now, or at least knew the way to get there. He lifted the golden key that rested against his vest. The blue flame glistened and illuminated the key as he let it dangle from its chain. It was curious. Why was his key not showing him the way back home? It was as if someone or something had blocked its power. Suddenly, Vina shuffled and stamped her hooves into the ground with irritation. A loud crashing sound reached his ears. The Nicholas jumped to his feet and strained his eyes in the direction of the sound. Grabbing his sword reflexively, he lifted it with both hands into the air. Large creatures trampled the low-lying bushes and parted the branches of the pines. Clear of the trees, they slowly approached. "Who approaches my camp?" He waved the sword menacingly, but knew he would not use it. He hadn't thus far, even with all of his harrowing experiences on the journey. "We are sorry to have startled you," the muffled voice of one rider called out and pulled his mount to a halt. "We come as friends, not foes. No weapon is needed." The Nicholas lowered his sword, but kept it in hand. He needed to be sure they were indeed friends. He quickly observed there were only 2 riders. Both were appropriately dressed for the weather and covered from head to foot. The only thing he could see was their eyes. The eyes of one of the riders grabbed his attention immediately. They were a bright shade of green and almost glowed in the moonlight. They were unlike any other that he had ever seen. The Nicholas took his key in hand as the 2 riders dismounted. For the first time in some days since he and Vina were lost, he could sense something. The 2 riders were of no danger, and there was something else. They did not belong to this planet. "We have been riding a distance behind you for some time." The rider moved a little closer to the Nicholas. "We were hoping we could share your fire and company tonight." Of course, the Nicholas rested his sword back down by the fire. "You are both welcome to join us. But what are the creatures you ride? They are unfamiliar." "They are Keldeer." The stranger removed the heavy scarf hiding his face. His reddish-brown eyes twinkled, and deep red curls turned upward toward his cap he wore. "They are sensitive and extremely intelligent creatures. You would not have seen them before because they are not from this world," the Nicholas offered. "Certainly they are from this world, but we are the first to discover them and their special talents." The stranger dismounted, strode to the Nicholas, and studied him. "We have named them, of course, as was our privilege." He scratched his cap, and a bell jingled. "You have a keen intuition, my new friend. I find you interesting." The stranger motioned to the other rider. "Come, Imelda, join us. I believe we have met someone who is both like and unlike us." The other rider slid from her Keldeer and folded back her hood, allowing the Nicholas to see her green eyes more clearly. They seemed to glow even brighter against her pale and smooth skin. A large woolen cape covered her shoulders unevenly. She gently folded one half of the cape back, and the Nicholas could see the reason for the unevenness. A blue bird rested on her uncovered shoulder and appeared to be sleeping soundly. "This is my companion, Ento," Imelda motioned to the bird, "and he can be a sound sleeper when he chooses." "Please, warm yourselves by the fire." The Nicholas joined the strangers as they sat by the flame, but kept his eyes glued on the Keldeer. "And tell me of your journey." The Keldeer stood quietly next to Vina. They were 3 times as tall as she and larger than the largest moose the Nicholas had ever seen. Their enormous antlers, from a quick eye measurement, appeared to span, from point to point, more than 16 feet. Vina, since the commotion had quieted, returned to eating her oats. "My name is Queel, and this is my traveling companion, Imelda." Queel leaned over the blue flame to warm his hands. "It is odd that you would think the Keldeer came from another world. What led you to such a conclusion?" I could sense that you were not from this world, and I thought that perhaps the Chaldeans weren't either. Quill leaned back from the fire and shifted his gaze toward their new acquaintance. Your senses intrigue me. I have my own ability to sense things. Quill extracted an object from his pocket. It was rectangular, thin, and not much larger than the size of his hand. It tells me much about you, my friend, and you are not from this world either. The Nicholas caught his breath and coughed. He wondered how much he should say about his own identity. He sensed no danger from Quill or from Imelda, so to tell them about his predicament was worth the risk. I am a Nicholas from the village of Nicholas. He took a deep intake of cold air and continued. Our history begins on this planet. We are known as the Givers and travel among men to deliver our gifts with the power of the Nicholas Key. The Nicholas Key? Imelda asked. The Nicholas displayed his golden key. Together, Quill and Imelda stared down at the engraved, intricate swirls and curls on the object in the hand of the Nicholas. What can this key do? Imelda focused her green eyes on the mysterious key. She had seen many strange and amazing things in her travels, but never a key like this one. It gives us our Nicholas magic and should guide us home, but he placed the key back against his shirt. For some reason, it has stopped working, and we, Vina and I, are lost. I should be able to help you with that. Quill tapped his finger rhythmically against his angular jaw. But first, you should know a bit about us. Your instincts were correct, my outer-worldly friend. I am a Kelv and come from the planet Kelvos. We Kelvs are travelers, space travelers. We visit planets to learn about the different species that inhabit our universe. And she? Imelda decided to join me for a time when I visited her planet, both she and Ento. Now, Quill raised the metallic gadget in his hand. This is my Calcom. It has the ability to discover the composition of anything placed on it. If we can discover what the key is made from, we can retrieve the coordinates of its location, your village. Quill reached his hand towards the Nicholas. Can I have the key? The Nicholas pulled back and shook his head vehemently. A Nicholas can never be separated from their key. I can place the key on my Calcom? Yes, your Calcom. Would that work? Quill nodded. The Nicholas extended his chain easily and placed his key on the face of the Calcom. They all watched as the Calcom illuminated. Numbers and odd markings began to race across the screen. A few moments passed, and it changed colors, but no more images could be seen. It has finished its calculations. You can remove your key now. Quill didn't notice the Nicholas remove his key. He was focused on what was on the screen. It concludes that the composition of the metal is not native to this planet. What planet does it come from? The Nicholas was excited. Could they finally discover where they really came from? Origin unknown, Quill read, squinting at the screen. That's all it reads. But, Quill said, beginning to smile, it has picked up some other trace deposits on your key that can direct us to your village. Here are the coordinates, see? The Nicholas looked at the screen. It looked like a jumble of numbers to him. We'll fly there in the morning. Fly? Of course! Quill jumped to his feet and gathered extra blankets from the Chaldean for both himself and Imelda. There's a field not far from here. The Chaldean just need a good run to pick up enough speed, and then... Quill handed a blanket to Imelda and then shot his hand toward the sky. Zoom! Off we go. I told you they had special talents. Quill finished with a wink. Can they really fly? The Nicholas asked, leaning toward Imelda. Quill was busy spreading out his blanket. Indeed they can, Imelda said, and they are quite fast. Ento stays securely on my shoulder, though. They fly too quickly for Ento to keep up. Ento fly, a voice said. The sleeping bluebird was now wide awake. A black mask of feathers circled his blinking blue eyes. Yes, Ento, Imelda patted her blue-feathered friend. Ento flies. The sun had not yet risen over the frozen walls that surrounded the village of Nicholas. Still, Snow Noble Forest and the village glowed with an orange and purple light. The Nicholases were awake and beginning to attend to their morning duties. Fires were stoked and the smell of hot cakes on the griddle began to fill the air. "Look!" a shout was heard. "Look! Up into the sky!" The Nicholases ran from their cottages out into the center of the village. The night watch, which had been posted as a precaution after the invasion of King Valvaray, stood pointing upward. Strange creatures were flying above them, high in the sky. Slowly they circled, began to descend into the village. "Hello!" a familiar cry was heard from one of the riders, just as the large, unfamiliar animals landed lightly by the blue flame. "He's back!" Timo shouted. He and Lyra ran forward and pulled the rider from his mount. Hugging him happily, they pulled him back to take a better look. "What a strange outfit you're wearing." Lyra tugged at the feather on her grandson's large brimmed hat. "And what is this?" Timo lifted the heavy iron sword attached to his grandson's belt, and his eyes widened with concern. Was the journey dangerous? "I'll tell you all about it later. I'm rather glad I wasn't transformed before my return." He patted the sword fondly. "This is a gift I will cherish." Master Lantorn was called and quickly joined the group gathered by the blue flame. "Indeed, our lost Nicholas has returned, along with some strangers." Master Lantorn placed his hand firmly on the shoulder of the once lost Nicholas, who now stood surrounded by his family. "Welcome back, Santa Nicholas, and tell us who has returned with you." So, now you know who the lost Nicholas is. It's Santa Nicholas. Like that, Santa Nicholas. And we've also met quite a few outer-worldly visitors. I would say that Earth has become a pretty busy place. Now, next week, I don't know if you've noticed, there's an empty chair right here next to us. And this gets filled with a permanent visitor next week. But you'll have to wait until next week and Chapter 5. Chapter 5 gives you a little hint. The coming of the Kelvs. And it begins like this. Santa Nicholas asked Queel and Imelda to stay for a while. Master Lantorn did not protest, but he was wary. Knowledge of the Nicholas village and its magic was not meant to be shared. So you think we're going to learn about some Kelvs next week? That'll be exciting. But that's not until next week. Until next week, a couple things I want you to remember. Both Masters of Nicholas and Benjamin Nicholas and the Golden Key are both available on Amazon right now. And if you've enjoyed our show, please leave me 2 thumbs up below. And don't forget to subscribe to Kids Book Read Aloud, S.C. Crovo, Magic of Nicholas, so that you never ever miss a show. And make sure you visit my website at sccrovo.com and join the Magical Nicholas Short Story Club and more. It's free to join, and you get more free stories about the amazing, incredible, magical families of Nicholas. Thanks for reading with me today. Until next week, when you hear the echoing cuckoo clock call, make a wish and have a magical week. Bye for now.